Okay, let's dive right into this stack of sources you brought us today. We're going to cover quite a bit: science, finance, global affairs, culture.
Yep, a real mix. The idea is to unpack what's significant in these articles and, why it actually matters to you.
Sounds good. Let's kick off with the science section. This first piece sounds pretty cutting edge: lab-grown bat organs.
It really is. Bats are fascinating creatures biologically. They can host some pretty nasty viruses, things that would make us incredibly sick,
Hmm.
but often they don't show symptoms themselves.
Right, I've heard that. Makes them important reservoirs, but hard to study, I imagine.
Exactly. That's been the big challenge. We don't have great tools historically, and their cells are just tricky. They don't always grow well in standard lab conditions.
So what's new here?
This research, published in journals like Science and PLSF Biology, represents a real breakthrough. They've managed to develop bat organoids.
Organoids. Like miniature simplified organs grown in the lab.
Precisely. Think tiny 3D structures that mimic the architecture and function of real bat organs, lungs, intestines, kidneys, you name it. And they've done this for multiple bat species, too.
Which species?
Both insect-eating bats and fruit bats, covering a good range. And crucially, they also develop stable bat cell lines that can be reliably cultured.
Okay, so we have these mini organs and reliable cells. What can we actually do with them?
Well, that's the exciting part. These models let researchers directly study how viruses interact with specific bat tissues. You can see if a virus prefers, say, lung tissue over gut tissue.
And if it affects one bat species differently than another.
Exactly. Species-specific and organ-specific vulnerability. For instance, they tested MERS-CoV.
Yeah,
MERS.
Middle East respiratory syndrome.
Well, they replicated pretty effectively in the bat respiratory organoids they created. But SARS-CoV-2, the COVID virus, that was different.
How so?
It actually needed a human gene added to the mix specifically, one called TMPRSS2, which helps the virus enter cells before it could effectively infect the bat respiratory models.
That's a really interesting detail. It suggests the jump isn't always straightforward.
Precisely. It highlights the complex molecular barriers that might exist. And beyond testing known viruses, they even use these models to discover new viruses lurking in wild bat populations.
Really? Like what?
They identified a previously unknown mammalian orthoroavirus and a new paramyxovirus.
Wow. So this isn't just about understanding existing threats, but finding potential new ones, too.
Exactly. So connecting this back to the listener, why does this matter? Especially for folks in places like India, which has incredible bat diversity, but maybe hasn't had these kinds of research tools readily available.
It sounds like a massive step for pandemic preparedness.
It really is.
Hmm.
These tools give us a way to monitor and research emerging viruses in the species they originate from or close relatives. It helps us understand the risks before a potential spillover event occurs. It strengthens our global surveillance and response capabilities.
Makes sense. Early warning systems based on better science.
Fundamentally, yes.
Okay, let's shift gears. Moving to the FAQ section now. First up, the Reserve Bank of India and gold loans. What's happening there?
Right, so the RBI has proposed some changes to the regulations around gold loans given out by banks and NBFC's non-banking financial companies.
Why now? Is there a problem?
Well, the RBI seems to think so, or at least wants to tighten things up. They've observed, let's say, irregular practices in the sector, plus there's been absolutely explosive growth.
Explosive how?
Bank gold loan portfolios reportedly doubled just in the last fiscal year. When you see that kind of rapid expansion, regulators tend to take a closer look.
Okay, so what are they proposing? What are the key changes?
The overall goal seems to be harmonization, making rules consistent and boosting borrower protection, clarity, transparency. One big point is the loan-to-value, or LTV, ratio.
That's how much you can borrow against the gold's value, right? Usually around 75%.
Correct. That 75% cap stays. But, and this is important, the proposal says accrued interest would now count as part of that 75%.
So the interest building up eats into your loan limit over time, effectively meaning the initial amount you get might be less.
That seems to be the implication, yes. It could reduce the upfront disbursed amount compared to current practices where interest might be calculated separately.
Interesting. What else?
Lenders would need stricter processes for verifying gold ownership and assessing purity uniformly based on 22 carats. Also, you wouldn't be able to get a single loan that covers both personal consumption and business or income generation at the same time.
Okay, more defined categories. And rules around renewals.
Yes, stricter rules there too. trying to prevent loans just being rolled over indefinitely without proper reassessment.
And there's something about compensation.
Yeah, this one's quite eye-catching. If a lender fails to return your gold collateral within 7 working days after you've fully repaid the loan, they'd have to pay you a penalty of $5,000 per day of delay.
Wow, that's got teeth. Real incentive to return the gold promptly.
Definitely adds a strong element of borrower protection.
So what's the likely impact of all this if it goes through?
Well, it's a mixed bag, probably. For borrowers, it could mean a bit less flexibility, maybe slightly lower loan amounts initially because of that LTV change. For lenders, definitely more compliance work, stricter processes.
Could it affect the market, especially smaller players?
Potentially, yes.
Yeah.
Smaller NBFCs might find the compliance burden heavier, maybe face funding challenges, and ultimately some of these increased operational costs for lenders. Well, they might get passed on to borrowers in some form.
And you raised a point earlier about gold loans being a lifeline, especially rurally.
That's the underlying question, really. Gold loans are often crucial, quick sources of cash for people who might not have access to formal credit, especially in rural areas. They serve a vital, sometimes informal function.
So will a stricter, more standardized, one-size-fits-all approach work effectively everywhere? Or could it inadvertently restrict access for those who need it most?
That's the debate, isn't it? Balancing prudential regulation and consumer protection with the socioeconomic reality of how these loans are used on the ground. It's a tricky line to walk.
Definitely something to watch. Okay, let's stay in the FAQ section, but shift to global events. Gaza ceasefire prospects. Where do things stand?
Well, it remains a deeply challenging situation. The war's been going on for, over 19 months now? There have been a couple of brief ceasefires before, but nothing sustained.
And international pressure is mounting.
Increasingly so, yes.
Yeah.
Particularly on Israel, and notably even from its staunchest allies. The U.S. is actively involved in mediation efforts, with Special Envoy Steve Witkoff leading talks.
What's the current situation on the ground, according to the source material?
The source describes devastating conditions in Gaza, widespread destruction, very high casualty figures reported by the Gaza health authorities, massive displacement of the population. At the same time, Israel states its objectives remain dismantling Hamas and securing the release of remaining hostages, while Hamas reportedly maintains a presence despite the Israeli operations.
And the allies' concerns. What's driving their pressure?
It seems to stem from reports of indiscriminate attacks causing civilian casualties, the sheer scale of the humanitarian crisis, and also some pretty harsh statements coming from certain Israeli ministers.
Like what kind of statements?
The source mentions views like needing Gaza to be completely destroyed, or ministers opposing aid delivery. This kind of rhetoric, combined with the situation on the ground, has drawn unified criticism from countries like the UK, France, Canada, Germany. Even former U.S. President Trump has weighed in critically.
So what's being proposed? What's in this Witkoff proposal?
Okay, so the proposal, which apparently has backing from Trump, suggests a 60-day ceasefire. It's quite detailed on the mechanics.
Such as?
It outlines specific exchanges. Hostages held by Hamas will be released in phases in return for Palestinian prisoners and detainees held by Israel. There are also provisions for exchanging the remains of deceased individuals on both sides.
60 days. What else happens during that time?
Significant aid delivery into Gaza is planned. Israeli forces, IDF, would apparently redeploy, perhaps moving out of major population centers, but maintaining security control elsewhere. And crucially, negotiations on a more permanent arrangement are supposed to start on day 1 of the ceasefire.
Okay, that sounds like a concrete plan. But what's the catch?
The catch, and it's a huge one highlighted in the source, is what the proposal doesn't resolve. The fundamental question of Gaza's long-term future.
The core disagreement.
Exactly. Israel's position is reported as demanding Hamas's surrender and disarmament. Hamas, on the other hand, demands a complete withdrawal of Israeli forces and an end to the blockade. The proposal doesn't bridge that gap.
So even if this 60-day ceasefire happens,
The prospects for lasting peace seem bleak based on this analysis, because that core political conflict over who controls Gaza and under what conditions remains completely unresolved. And just to be clear, we're reporting neutrally on how the source presents this deadlock.
understood. A potential pause, but the fundamental issues remain entrenched. Okay, let's move on. Still thinking about conflict, but shifting to its impact on aviation, using the India-Pakistan dynamic.
Right. This piece looks at how military tensions often spill over into closing airspace, which has significant consequences. We've seen recent examples, temporary closures by both India and Pakistan following events like the attack in Pahalgam or something called Operation Sindoor mentioned in India. And apparently these closures have been reissued again recently.
Is this a new thing or does it have a history?
Oh, there's a long history. Airspace closures between India and Pakistan have pretty much mirrored the ups and downs of their bilateral relationship for decades.
Examples.
Think back to the 1965 war. Airspace was closed then. There was a major incident in 1971 after an Indian plane was hijacked to Lahore and burned. India banned Pakistani overflights for years. That dispute even went to the International Court of Justice and wasn't resolved until 1976.
Wow. And more recently?
Closures happened during the Kargil conflict in '99, after the Parliament attack in 2001, and again after the Balakot airstrikes in 2019. It's a recurring pattern when tensions spike.
What's the economic cost of this?
It can be substantial. The source gives an indicative estimate. Obviously, these figures can be complex to calculate, but suggests a loss of around 7,000 crore for the Indian aviation sector, specifically in 2025, tied to recent closures.
It's a big number. How does it actually affect flights operationally?
Well, specific airports or segments of airspace get shut down completely. This forces airlines to reroute. All the traffic gets funneled onto the remaining open routes.
Creating bottlenecks.
Exactly. You might see traffic loads shifting significantly between major air corridors, like maybe less traffic over the India-Pakistan waypoints, and much more on routes like Mumbai-Muscat over the Arabian Sea.
Yeah.
This increases the number of aircraft movements per hour that air traffic control has to handle on those routes.
So more work for controllers.
Yes, though they manage it using standard procedures. But it definitely increases complexity and potentially causes delays or requires longer flight paths, which burns more fuel.
Is there any international framework to manage this? International law?
International law does provide mechanisms, like through ICA, International Civil Aviation Organization, but the source notes that, realistically, the effectiveness of these mechanisms in preventing or quickly resolving politically motivated airspace closures really depends on the political will of the countries involved.
So law exists, but politics often overrides it in these standoffs.
That seems to be the practical reality, yes.
Okay, fascinating. Let's move into the magazine section now. A diverse set of stories here. First up, Gulzar.
Ah, Gulzar, true legend. And this piece highlights a really unique paradox about him.
Which is?
He's won India's highest literary award, the Jnanpith, primarily for his poetry, but he's also won pretty much every top film award imaginable. Multiple Filmfare Awards, a Grammy, an Oscar for Jai Ho, the Dadasaheb Phalke Award.
Right, the Lifetime Achievement Award for Cinema. Has anyone else achieved that kind of dual peak?
Apparently not. The source says no one else has even come close to bridging that gap between elite literary recognition and mainstream film success at such a high level.
But how does he see it? Does he value one over the other?
Oh, very much so. He's quite clear that he prizes his literary work, his poetry, far more. He uses this beautiful analogy. Literature is like the permanent blue sky, while films are like transient clouds passing through it.
That's quite a perspective. So his film fame, almost,
Yeah.
obscures his literary identity.
To some extent, yes. He's primarily an Urdu poet, a very significant one, but his massive fame comes from his work as a lyricist and filmmaker.
What makes his poetry distinctive?
He generally prefers the Nazm form over the more common ghazal. Nazms are typically more thematic, contemplative, less bound by strict couplet structures. And often he pushes boundaries further, abandoning traditional rhyme and meter altogether for free verse. He's also known for very short, imagist poems, capturing a moment or feeling with sharp, concise imagery.
And his subjects, is it all highbrow stuff?
Not at all. That's part of his appeal. His themes range incredibly widely, from observing everyday life on the Mumbai metro to grappling with cosmic ideas, writing unique kinds of love poems, and offering quite pointed social commentary poems about burning cars or mobs during riots.
So huge range. And he does more than just poetry and lyrics.
Oh, absolutely. He's incredibly prolific. He's written short stories, a novel, acclaimed children's books, screenplays for classic films. He even translated the works of Rabindranath Tagore and spent 9 years compiling and editing a massive anthology of Indian poetry across multiple languages. The man is just soaked in literature.
It sounds like two separate careers almost.
The source uses the analogy of twins separated at birth. Apparently, a recent publication actually printed his literary Nazms alongside his film songs, highlighting this duality. It's also a great anecdote about him at an airport.
Oh, yeah.
Where he's mobbed by fans recognizing the film celebrity, while he's probably internally thinking about some deep literary idea or poetic image. It perfectly captures that tension between his public persona and his profound literary depth.
A fascinating figure. Okay, next in the magazine, a story about Awadh's last Mirasins. Who are the Mirasins?
The Mirasins are traditional female folk singers, specifically from the Mirasi community in the Awadh region of Uttar Pradesh. They are, or were, custodians of a unique musical heritage passed down through generations.
And this story focuses on the end of that tradition.
Sadly, yes. It profiles Umrana Niazi and Farzana, who were described as possibly the last practicing Mirasins in Awadh. They're third-generation singers in their family.
What was their traditional role? When did they perform?
Historically, they were hired to sing at auspicious family occasions, births, weddings, festivals. They were apparently quite popular and patronized by aristocratic families back in the 19th century.
Any specific rituals?
Yes, especially weddings. They had specific songs and roles during ceremonies, like the Milad, the holy ceremony, welcoming the groom's procession, the Barat. They were seen as integral to preserving the cultural fabric of these events through their music.
But that's decline. When did things change?
The decline seems to have accelerated sharply since the 2000s. There are several reasons cited.
Such as?
Well, for one, the old patrons, the aristocratic families, are either gone or their lifestyles have changed. The tradition itself started being seen as perhaps old-fashioned by some. There's also the influence of rising religious conservatism, which often discourages women from performing publicly.
Is there a gender dynamic at play, too?
Definitely. The source mentions gender disparity. Male folk singers in the region often earn more, have more opportunities, and use a wider range of instruments. The Mirasins were often limited primarily to singing accompanied only by the dolak, a type of hand drum.
And competition from modern music.
That's another big factor. The rise of popular film music, easily played on sound systems, has increasingly replaced live, traditional performances like theirs at weddings and other functions.
It sounds like a confluence of factors pushing them out. What about the next generation?
That's perhaps the most poignant part. The younger generation and their families isn't interested in taking up the tradition. They see it as hard work with little financial reward or social recognition, unfortunately.
So Umrana and Farzana are struggling.
Yes, they struggle to make ends meet through their singing now. And there's a very real fear expressed in the article that when they stop performing, this entire specific tradition of Awadhi women's folk singing might just disappear.
A real loss of cultural heritage. Heavy stuff. Okay, let's shift to something potentially more optimistic. Next-gen materials in fashion.
Right, this tackles a big problem.
Yeah.
The fashion industry's environmental footprint. It's a major polluter.
Oh.
Heavily reliant on synthetic materials derived from fossil fuels like polyester, fashion accounts for a huge chunk of global plastic production and greenhouse gas emissions. And even traditional natural fibers have their own environmental impacts.
So we need alternatives.
Exactly. And that's where material innovators come in, developing new textiles from quite unexpected sources, biomaterials mainly.
Give me some examples. What kind of weird stuff are we talking about?
Okay, how about jewelry made from beads of algae, or textile fibers derived from waste potato stems and leaves? Seaweed fiber is another one.
Potato stems and seaweed. Okay. Anything else?
There's banana tex, plastic-free fabric made from abaca banana plant fibers, which is actually being used by some luxury brands already. And there's a big push to use agricultural leftovers, things like straw, tomato pulp, even waste coconut water, through initiatives like Canopy India, turning waste into usable fiber.
Fascinating. The article also mentions leather alternatives specifically.
Yes, that's a huge area of focus. Animal leather production has significant issues. Its carbon footprint, links to deforestation for cattle ranching, the chemicals used in tanning. It's pretty contentious.
So what are the alternatives there? Fake plastic leather?
Some are synthetic, yes, but the exciting developments are in bio-based leather alternatives. The article lists several.
Like?
Mirum, which is made from natural rubber and other plant-based ingredients. Reishi, derived from mycelium, the root structure of mushrooms. Deserto, made from cactus fibers. Pinatex, from pineapple leaf fibers.
Pineapple leaves? Wow.
There's also Banofi, using banana crop waste, similar to banana tex, but maybe processed differently for a leather-like feel. And Malai, which uses bacterial cellulose grown on waste coconut water.
Coconut water leather. So do these actually look and feel like animal leather?
Some are designed to mimic it very closely. Others, like Malai apparently, have their own distinct look and feel, offering designers new textures to work with.
This all sounds amazing. What are the hurdles? Why isn't everything made of this stuff yet?
Several challenges. Cost is a big one. These new materials are often more expensive to produce than cheap synthetics or even traditional leather, at least for now. The research and development is long, complex, and needs significant funding.
Scalability, too, I imagine. Making enough for the mass market.
Exactly. Scaling up production is tough, although some companies, like natural fiber welding, which makes Miram, are reportedly finding ways to do it. There's also a need for greater collaboration between these innovators and major fashion retailers to really drive adoption.
Any other downsides?
One point mentioned is that even some plant-based materials might still incorporate small amounts of synthetic binders or coatings for durability, so it's not always a 100% bio-based solution yet. But the direction of innovation is clear, trying to decouple fashion from its heavy reliance on polluted materials.
Definitely an area to watch. Okay, final piece from the magazine section. The Sacred Music Festival.
Yes, this piece reflects on the 12th Annual Festival of Sacred Music, organized by the Prakriti Foundation, held in Tamil Nadu.
Is this part of a bigger trend? Sacred music festivals?
It seems so. The article places it in the context of a growing number of such festivals happening both globally and within India, focusing on music with spiritual or religious connections.
What was this particular festival like?
The report describes it very positively. Excellent quality performances, superb artists, with a strong focus on classical Carnatic music.
Any specific highlights or moments mentioned?
Yes, several evocative examples. There's mention of the synergy between performances happening during the day versus at night, visiting temples associated with famous composers whose music was being performed.
Oh, cool. Like connecting the music to its origins.
Exactly. For instance, hearing the renowned singer Sikil Gurucharan perform a piece for the deity Bangaru Kamakshi, directly linking his music to the composer Shama Shastri, who wrote for that deity. Another example was Shruti Veena Vishwanath, who blended classical and folk styles, performing Marathi Abhang's devotional poems and interpreting them as historical texts of resistance, even highlighting their musical dissonance and unusual endings.
Interesting interpretation. Any others?
There was also a Veena ensemble led by Thiruva Takudi C. Saravanan, performing compositions by figures like Muthu Thandavar, described as a creative but somewhat forgotten composer. It highlighted the depth and sometimes overlooked history within the tradition.
What about the atmosphere? The sacred aspect?
The setting seems key. Performances often took place in intimate spaces, temple precincts, old palace ruins illuminated by traditional lamps, which apparently created an atmosphere very conducive to Carnatic music's subtleties. The sacred wasn't just in the music itself, but felt in moments like experiencing a temple darshan alongside pilgrims and drummers just before a concert began.
Sounds quite immersive. What's the overall takeaway from the piece?
I think the author suggests that, perhaps especially in divisive times, high-level artistic expression like this offers a source of hope, solace, maybe even connection.
And the state of Carnatic music itself?
Despite occasional complaints or controversies one might hear about, the piece concludes that Carnatic music is actually flourishing, with many talented young artists actively experimenting with forms and presentation. Festivals like this are seen as crucial spaces for nurturing that vibrancy.
A positive note on the power of music and tradition.
Indeed. It suggests these cultural events have a value beyond just entertainment.
Thank you for listening. You can give suggestions by contacting on Twitter handle given in the episode description. We are always eager to hear what our listeners want to be informed about.